I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was. That wasn't arrogance, that was prophecy. Today's episode isn't just about boxing, it's about conviction, sacrifice, and the courage to stand alone. Because no athlete in history paid a higher price for his beliefs, and no athlete changed the world more by refusing to bend than Muhammad Ali. This is a story of a boy from Louisville, Kentucky, who became a global icon and proved that greatness isn't just built in victories. It's built in what you're willing to lose. Muhammad Ali was born on January 17th, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky, as Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., long before the world would chant his name. Long before arenas shook at his presence, he was simply a boy in a modest home in the American South. His family gave him the first of what would be many nicknames he accrued over his life. They called him Dinky Baby, a soft and affectionate nickname that contrasted sharply with the toughness life would demand from him. His mother, Odessa Clay, was gentle, deeply religious, and steady in her faith as a Baptist. She believed in discipline, respect, and moral order. She gave Ali structure and warmth. His father, on the other hand, Cassius Clay Sr., was a talented sign painter, proud of his skill, but troubled by alcohol. When he drank, his temper flared, and the household often felt unstable. Ali later reflected on those early years and admitted that fear was not an occasional presence in his childhood, it was something that constantly lingered in the background. School presented another challenge. Ali struggled academically and was later found to have dyslexia. Reading did not come easily to him, and many teachers underestimated his intelligence. At one point, graduation seemed uncertain. It took the personal intervention of a school principal who believed in Ali, told the teachers in a meeting that he would not allow young Cassius to fail, and committed to helping him complete his requirements and earn his diploma. That experience left an imprint. Ali learned early that people might not see your potential, and sometimes you have to create proof of it yourself. The moment that changed his life happened when he was just 12 years old. His bicycle was stolen outside a store in Louisville. Furious and humiliated, young Cassius marched to a police officer to report the theft and declared that he wanted to whoop whoever had taken it. That officer was Joe Martin, a policeman who also happened to run a boxing gym in the basement of a community center. Instead of dismissing the angry boy, Martin handed him a boxing sign-up form. He told Cassius that if he wanted to fight someone, he'd better learn how first. Martin even offered to train him for free. That basement gym became the birthplace of discipline in Ali's life. From that day forward, Ali trained with obsession. He ran the streets before dawn. He practiced footwork until it became second nature. He shadowboxed in front of mirrors, studying his own movement. What separated him from other boys was not raw strength, but relentless repetition. He began to understand that greatness is not an accident. It is built in habits. By the time he was a teenager, Ali had already developed a style that was unusual for heavyweights. He moved lightly, almost playfully, darting in and out rather than planting his feet. He talked constantly, predicting victories and rhyming insults. That confidence would later be called arrogance. But even then it was something deeper. It was belief. As an amateur boxer, Clay won 6 Kentucky Golden Gloves titles, 2 Chicago Golden Glove titles, 2 National Golden Glove titles, 2 Amateur Athletic Union national titles, and the U.S. Olympic trials. His amateur record, before he turned pro, was 100 wins and only 8 losses. That is a shitload of fights. 108 fights before he even turned pro. That is wild. In 1960, at just 18 years old, Ali qualified for the Olympic Games in Rome. There was just one problem. He was terrified of flying. His fear was so intense that he reportedly wore a parachute on the plane ride overseas. Good luck trying to get away with that on a commercial flight nowadays. They would have your ass on the no-fly list pretty damn quick. That detail is more than a story, though it reveals something essential about him. courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means boarding that plane anyway. When Ali arrived in Rome, he didn't enter quietly. He proclaimed himself the greatest amateur boxer in the world and dubbed himself the King of the Olympics. His non-stop confidence earned him yet another nickname from reporters, the Louisville Lip. They weren't sure whether to laugh at him or admire him, but he did not stop talking. Then he stepped into the ring. Ali dazzled opponents with speed and reflexes rarely seen in the light heavyweight division. He jabbed sharply, moved effortlessly, and outclassed fighters who had expected an easy path. In the final bout, he won the gold medal by decision. Standing proudly atop the podium at just 18 years old, he truly was the king of the Olympics. When he returned home, however, the reality of America confronted him. Despite wearing a gold medal around his neck, he still faced racial discrimination in his own city. Restaurants refused him service. Respect was conditional. Ali later claimed that in frustration and anger, he threw his Olympic medal into the Ohio River. Now, there is some conflicting stories that say Clay lost his medal about a year after he had won it. So whether he lost it when he threw it in the river, or maybe people are trying to make it seem or not seem as bad as it was, but regardless, he was no longer in possession of that medal. Whether that was literal or symbolic, the meaning was clear. Victory abroad did not erase injustice at home. The realization would shape the man he became. So even though he had thrown away his previous medal, I'm not sure if you remember or even if you were old enough, but Ali lit the torch at the 1996 Summer Olympics at Atlanta. And while he was there, they actually did give him a replacement gold medal for the one he lost or threw away. But we'll get more into that Atlanta Olympics a little bit later. After the Olympics, Ali turned professional under the guidance of a group known as the Louisville Sponsoring Group, a collection of local businessmen who invested in his early career. Unlike many fighters of that era, Ali was not controlled by criminal interests. He had financial support, autonomy, and room to grow. That stability allowed him to refine both his skill and his persona. He studied and learned his trash-talking persona from the flamboyant professional wrestler Gorgeous George. Learning that showmanship could amplify success and attract huge crowds, Ali realized that fights were won not only in the ring, but also in the imagination of the public. He began rhyming predictions like, "Joe's gonna come out smoking, but I ain't gonna be joking. This might shock and amaze ya, but I'm going to destroy Joe Frazier." Relentless taunting of opponents and promising knockouts in advance, it was strategic performance layered on top of disciplined preparation. On February 10th, 1962, Ali fought at Madison Square Garden against Sonny Banks. During that fight, he was knocked down for the first time in his professional career. The crowd was shocked, and for a moment, the myth of invincibility cracked. But Ali stood up. He regained his rhythm and stopped Banks by TKO in the 4th round. That night revealed something critical. Ali was not defined by whether he fell. He was defined by how he responded. Even before he held a world title, Ali declared, "I am the greatest." It sounded outrageous. It sounded impossible, but what most people missed was that those words were not boastful exaggeration. They were commitment. Ali wasn't predicting greatness. He was preparing to earn it. February 25th, 1964. The night Cassius Clay fought Sonny Liston, and Clay went into this fight as an 8-1 underdog due to the absolute beating Liston had just put on former heavyweight champ Floyd Patterson. However, Clay came out with his signature speed and mobility and danced around the ring, at times making Liston look awkward with big misses. After he opened up a cut under Liston's eye in the 3rd round, it was apparent that Clay was just as great as he claimed to be. But then something happened. At the end of the 4th round, Clay started complaining about his eyes burning, and he was having trouble even keeping them open. and even asked his trainer, Angelo Dundee, to cut off his gloves. Dundee refused. Ali proceeded, but he was not happy and essentially blind at that point. There is speculation that the ointment used to seal Liston's cut had made its way onto his gloves, intentionally or unintentionally, who knows, and was blinding Clay. Eventually, by the 6th round, sweat and tears had flushed his eyes, and Clay could see enough to get back to the whooping he had been giving Liston. And at the start of the 7th round, Liston was unable to continue, and Clay was declared the winner by TKO. He became the heavyweight champion of the world. But what happened the very next morning would change his life far more than any punch ever could. On February 26, 1964, less than 24 hours after shocking the boxing world, Ali announced publicly that he was a member of the Nation of Islam. Now, before his proclamation, there was tons of pictures of him with Martin Luther King, who was also Malcolm X, who was also a member of the Nation of Islam. So it wasn't necessarily the best kept secret, but he himself had not publicly come out between hanging with Malcolm X and the leader at the time of the Nation of Islam. Everyone kind of figured that was his religious belief, but eventually he came out, obviously, and made it clear. He declared that he would no longer answer to the name Cassius Clay. That name, he said, was a slave name. It had been passed down through generations during a time when his ancestors had no choice in what they were called. For a brief period, he referred to himself as Cassius X, the X symbolizing the unknown African name lost through slavery. Soon after, Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad gave him a new name, Muhammad Ali. The name meant worthy of praise and most high. To Ali, this was not a publicity move. It was not marketing. It was reclamation. It was identity. It was spiritual alignment. Hang on one second. I think I said Cassius X. He was referring to himself as Muhammad X. Sorry, not Cassius X. At the point where he decided to change his name before he was given Muhammad Ali. To much of America, however, sorry to sidetrack it there. To much of America, however, it was rebellion. Broadcasters refused to call him Muhammad Ali. Sports writers continued to print Cassius Clay in headlines, sometimes placing his chosen name in quotation marks as if it were imaginary. Opponents mocked him openly. Promoters hesitated. The heavyweight champion of the world had suddenly become controversial. But Ali did not bend. He understood something most people did not. Fame is fragile. Identity must not be. In the months following his name change, Ali traveled to Africa, including a significant trip to Ghana in 1964. While in Ghana, he was not treated as an agitator or an extremist. He was embraced as a symbol of pride. Crowds welcomed him as a son returning home. That experience deepened his sense that his life was about more than boxing. He began to see himself not only as an athlete, but as a voice. Still, boxing demanded attention. A rematch with Sonny Liston was scheduled for May 25th, 1965 in Lewiston, Maine. The location was pretty unusual. It was a small hockey rink, maybe 1,500 people, I think, that it would hold. So it was a small hockey rink rather than a major arena, but the fight would become one of the most debated in history. Just over 2 minutes into the first round, Ali landed a short, sharp right hand. Liston fell to the canvas. He remained there as confusion filled the ring. The referee struggled to regain control. Ali stood over Liston, shouting, "Get up and fight, sucker!" The image of Ali, towering above the fallen champion, became one of the most iconic photographs in sports history. I'm sure you've all seen this picture of Muhammad Ali, where he's standing. Obviously, the guy's lying on the ground. He's kind of giving him a look like, unbelievable, get up. And that's what it's from. The punch was later called the Phantom Punch. Some had questioned whether it was powerful enough to cause a knockout. Rumors of a fix circulated. The FBI even reviewed aspects of the fight due to Liston's alleged connections to organized crime. No conclusive evidence ever proved wrongdoing, so eventually all was forgotten. They both moved on. Ali, however, did not concern himself with conspiracy theories. In his mind, he had won, and in boxing, the official record is what remains. By 1966, another battle loomed, one outside the ropes. The Vietnam War was escalating, and Ali received his draft notice. As heavyweight champion, he could have pursued deferments quietly. He could have complied without protest. Many expected him to do same as Joe Frazier, I believe. Yeah, Joe Frazier or Patterson. One of them was the champ at the time, enlisted, went off and served his duty, and then came back. That's not Ali's way of doing it. So instead, Ali refused induction into the U.S. military. He declared himself a conscientious objector, citing religious beliefs and opposition to the war. His explanation was direct and unapologetic. I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong, he said. No Viet Cong ever called me the N-word with a hard R. You know which one I'm talking about. Those words reverberated across America. They were not carefully polished. They were not softened for approval. They were raw, and they were personal. Ali's stance was deeply unpopular. Public opinion at the time heavily favored the war effort. Political leaders condemned him. Commentators labeled him unpatriotic. Some fans who once cheered him now booed him. In February 1967, the World Boxing Association stripped Ali of his heavyweight title. State athletic commissions revoked his license to fight. On April 28, 1967, he formally refused induction into the armed forces. And on June 20th, 1967, he was convicted of draft evasion in federal court. He was fined $10,000 and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Although he remained free while appealing the conviction, the practical effect was immediate. Muhammad Ali was banned from boxing at the age of 25. When Muhammad Ali was stripped of his heavyweight title in 1967, many believed his story had reached its inevitable peak. To the public, the belt symbolized greatness. When it was taken away, critics assumed greatness had been taken away with it. But what they misunderstood was this. Ali's greatness had never depended on leather and gold. It depended on conviction. The exile that followed was not loud. It was not dramatic in the way a championship fight is dramatic. It was quiet, uncertain, and heavy. For 3.5 years, there were no weigh-ins, no television lights, and no roar of a crowd when he entered a room. There was no bell to punctuate rounds, and no opponent standing across from him. There was only silence. For a man whose identity had been shaped by motion, by rhythm, by performance, that silence was suffocating. On August 17th, 1967, Ali married 17-year-old Belinda Boyd. Together they would have 4 children. Ali's fame, however, created constant temptation. He was charismatic and admired worldwide. Infidelity strained the marriage. Financial stress added further pressure. In December 1969, Ali even took on a role in a Broadway play titled Buck White, portraying a militant black activist. The show lasted only 5 nights. It was another example of Ali attempting to navigate life without the ring, searching for purpose in unfamiliar arenas. However, there was also tension within the Nation of Islam. As financial difficulties deepened, Ali publicly stated that he would return to boxing to pay his debts. This comment conflicted with certain teachings emphasizing faith that Allah would provide. As a result, he was temporarily suspended from the nation. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ali stood nearly alone, without a title, without a license, and without the institutional support that had once guided him. Ali woke up in the mornings without a fight to obsess over. He no longer structured his day around sparring sessions, roadwork miles, and strategic film study. The discipline that he had once driven toward a clear objective now felt suspended in midair. It is one thing to lose a fight, it is another thing entirely to lose the arena in which you fight. Despite the ban, Ali did not allow his body to drift into softness. He trained relentlessly, even without a contract waiting for him. He ran long distances in Chicago's cold mornings, often before the city fully stirred. He shadowboxed in empty gyms, working combinations against invisible opponents. He drilled footwork patterns across wooden floors worn smooth by decades of fighters before him. There was no payday attached to this work. There was no guarantee that he would ever be licensed again. He trained because he understood something elemental. Discipline is not dependent on applause. It is dependent on identity. During these years, he traveled across the country speaking at universities. Students expected theatrics, but many encountered something deeper. They heard a man who spoke about faith, race, morality, and responsibility with unusual clarity. He defended his refusal to fight in Vietnam, not with anger alone, but with conviction. "I would rather die than betray my beliefs," he said more than once. The words were not dramatic flourishes. They were statements of consequence. He knew prison had been a real possibility. He knew his career had been sacrificed, yet he did not waver. He often reminded audiences, "If my mind can conceive it and my heart can believe it, then I can achieve it." For Ali, this was not motivational rhetoric, it was survival logic. His mind had conceived a version of himself that did not bend under pressure. His heart believed in it. Now he had to live it. Time, however, does not pause for principle. As the months stretched into years, Ali could feel subtle changes in his body. His reflexes were not as immediate as they once had been. Excuse me. The effortless bounce in his legs required more effort. He was still strong, still disciplined, but he knew that exile had taken something intangible: rhythm. When the United States Supreme Court unanimously overturned his conviction in 1971, Ali was vindicated, legally. Yet vindication did not restore lost time. He was no longer the 22-year-old who had danced around Sonny Liston. He was now 29 years old, returning from a forced absence in a division that had continued evolving without him. The training camp for his return against Joe Frazier was unlike any he had experienced before. In his earlier years, Ali trained with flair and confidence, often smiling through road work and joking with sparring partners. This camp carried urgency. He ran longer miles at a steadier, grinding pace, building endurance rather than relying on youthful explosiveness. He sparred hard rounds, sometimes pushing beyond what his trainers advised, determined to sharpen timing, dulled by inactivity. He studied Frazier's relentless left hook repeatedly, understanding that one mistake against that weapon could end a fight. The young Ali had trained to dominate. This Ali trained to endure. Publicly, he still delivered his poetic confidence. He predicted victory as he always had. But inside camp, there was an awareness that this fight would demand more than speed. It would demand resilience. On March 8th, 1971, under the lights of Madison Square Garden, Ali faced Joe Frazier in what was billed at the time as the fight of the century. It was the first time two undefeated heavyweight champions met for the title. The belt carried political symbolism, cultural weight, and personal pride. From the opening rounds, it became clear that this would not be a graceful dance. Frazier pressed forward relentlessly, cutting off the ring, forcing exchanges. Ali's jabs snapped sharply, but his legs did not carry him away with the same ease they once had. The exile had cost him mobility. Round after round, Frazier's left hook landed with punching force. Ali absorbed punishment he once would have evaded. By the 15th round, both men were exhausted. But Frazier still possessed his signature weapon. And then it happened. Frazier's left hook crashed into Ali's jaw and sent him to the canvas. The sound in Madison Square Garden exploded. It was a defining image, the once untouchable champion lying on his back. But once again, Ali rose. He gathered himself and stood. Even knowing the decision would likely go against him, When the judges awarded Frazier the unanimous decision, Ali had suffered his first professional defeat. Later reflecting on that loss, he said, "Only a man who knows what it is like to be defeated can reach down to the bottom of his soul and come up with the extra ounce of power it takes to win when the match is even." I mean, look, I think losing any time is tough. But after such a long delay, props to him for even getting in there against the champ. You know, some people might have taken some fights before that. Who knows? Just hops right in there. Has at her. I think he had a few. Maybe he had a few warm-up fights. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. When Muhammad Ali defeated Joe Frazier by unanimous decision in their 1974 rematch, he did more than avenge a loss. He proved that he could evolve. The young Ali had been a dancer, a magician of reflexes, a heavyweight who moved like a welterweight. The exile had taken something from him, physically, and the first time Frazier fight exposed it. But instead of denying that reality, Ali adapted to it. He understood something many champions refuse to accept. Greatness is not static. It must adjust or it disappears. Now, standing between him and the heavyweight championship was George Foreman. Foreman was destruction in human form. He was younger, stronger, and frighteningly powerful. He had dismantled Joe Frazier with ease. Most experts believe Ali would not survive more than a few rounds. Some even openly feared for his safety. Ali heard all of it, and he smiled. Publicly, he delivered the same swaggering confidence he always had. "I am the greatest," he declared again. But inside training camp, there was no illusion about the challenge ahead. He knew he could not defeat Foreman with speed alone. His legs no longer carried him endlessly around the ring. His defense would have to absorb what it once avoided. Preparation for the Foreman fight became one of the most intelligent camps of Ali's career. He trained not for dominance, but for durability. He strengthened his torso and neck muscles to better withstand impact. He practiced leaning against the ropes, allowing them to absorb some of the force of the heavy punches. He would have sparring partners that had the same style as Foreman, and they would just be swinging at him. Like, that was... I've seen the videos. There's some great Ali documentaries out there, but he literally is just backed up into the corner, ducking, weaving, doing what he can to avoid being hit, and this guy is just throwing punch after punch. It's fucking wild. So, I mean, they say he's smarter, but I mean, there's probably some unexpected shots he didn't have to take there. But yeah, so he'd duck and weave, do his best to avoid their punches. He drilled controlled breathing under pressure, understanding that panic wastes oxygen faster than pain does. He would chop wood for hours, run 7 to 8 miles a day, and as the great ones always do, he prepared for every possible scenario he could encounter while in the ring. So when he stepped into the ring, there would be no surprises. Well, before this fight, Ali was doing some training in his gym. He had a bunch of media, a bunch of other people who literally had just seats around. He was skipping rope, punching the bag, and the whole time he was just talking. And this is where one of my personal favorite Muhammad Ali, I guess, quote-unquote poems, I think it was added at one point. It's called I Am the Greatest. But this is the first time that I'm aware of that he had spoken it out loud. Was sitting on the ring apron during his training, surrounded by media and onlookers. "Last night I had a dream. When I got to Africa, I had one hell of a rumble. I had to beat Tarzan's behind first for claiming to be king of the jungle. For this fight, I've wrestled with alligators. I've tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning and thrown thunder in jail. You know I'm bad. Just last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick. I'm so fast, man, I can run through a hurricane and don't get wet. When George Foreman meets me, he'll pay his debt. I can drown the drink of water and kill a dead tree. Wait till you see Muhammad Ali." I mean, whether he wrote it down, whether he memorized it, whether it was just off the top of his head, I think it's fantastic. I don't know, there's something about it that I enjoy. And I mean, look, the guy, he definitely did not lack confidence in himself, that's for sure. Ali later said, "The fight is won or lost far away from witnesses, behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road. In Zaire, that philosophy guided everything he did." On October 30th, 1974, under the African sky in Kinshasa, Ali and Foreman stepped into the ring for what would be called, famously, the Rumble in the Jungle. From the opening round, the world realized something unusual was unfolding. Ali did not circle endlessly as expected. Instead, he leaned back against the ropes. He allowed Foreman to throw thunderous punches at his arms and body. Spectators and commentators were bewildered. It looked reckless. It was deliberate. It would become known as the rope-a-dope. Ali had calculated that Foreman's power came at a cost. Every explosive punch required energy. Every missed swing accelerated fatigue. By leaning into the ropes, Ali reduced the impact while forcing Foreman to expend himself. Pretty much just letting the poor guy tucker himself out. Between rounds, Ali remained calm. During exchanges, I love this. During exchanges, he'd whisper to Foreman, taunting him quietly, asking if that was all he had. He was not just absorbing punches, he was draining belief. As the rounds passed, Foreman's breathing deepened. His punches slowed, his arms felt heavier. And in the 8th round, Ali exploded forward. A precise combination of rights and lefts snapped Foreman's head back. Foreman fell to the canvas. And Ali stood victorious. It was one of the greatest tactical upsets in sports history. He had not overpowered the monster. He had outthought him. After the fight, Ali simply said, "I told you, all my critics, that I was the greatest of all time." This time, the world did not laugh. If the Foreman fight demonstrated Ali's intelligence, the third fight with Joe Frazier revealed his endurance. On October 1st, 1975, in the Philippines, Ali and Frazier met for the final time. This is about what was affectionately known as the Thrilla in Manila. The conditions were brutal. The heat inside the arena climbed to unbearable levels. The air felt heavy and suffocating. I think I read somewhere that it was like 110, 115 degrees Fahrenheit in there. That's hot. This was not a contest of finesse. It was attrition. Ali's training for Manila emphasized stamina above all else. He ran punishing distances in humid conditions to simulate the environment. He sparred extended rounds, forcing himself to fight through exhaustion. He knew Frazier would not back up. He knew the fight would not be elegant. From the opening bell, both men traded punishment. Frazier's left hook continued to find its mark. Ali's combinations answered back with precision. Sweat poured from their bodies as the heat intensified. Each round demanded more than the last. By the later rounds, Ali was visibly exhausted. Between rounds, he reportedly told his trainer that he felt close to collapse. Yet when the bell rang, he rose again. After the 14th round, Frazier's trainer made the decision to stop the fight. Frazier had absorbed a ton of punishment, his eyes were nearly swollen shut, and Ali was declared the winner. So the trilogy fight, 1-1. Ali now takes that best of 3, 2 fights to 1. Later, Ali reflected on the fight and said, "It was the closest thing to dying that I know of. It was not exaggeration. It was an admission of how much he had demanded from himself." This was also when Ali first spoke about retirement. "I'm sore all over. My arms, my face, my sides, all ache. I'm so tired. There is a possibility that I will retire. You may have seen the last of me. I want to sit back and count my money, live in my house and farm, work for my people, and concentrate on my family." The Thrilla in Manila did not elevate Ali because of dominance. It elevated him because of his survival. By the late 1970s, the physical cost of a lifetime in the ring became more difficult to ignore. Ali's reflexes slowed further. His speech sometimes lagged and slurred. The subtle tremors that would later define his diagnosis began quietly. Yet still, he continued. In 1978, he lost the heavyweight title to Leon Spinks, a young and relatively inexperienced fighter. It marked the first time Ali had lost the championship inside the ring rather than through suspension, having it stripped from him. At the time of the fight, Spinks only had 7 professional fights under his belt. And Ali, in preparation for this fight, had sparred less than 24 rounds. He was out of shape, and this loss stung deeply. But Ali demanded a rematch. In New Orleans, at the Superdome, he reclaimed the title by unanimous decision, becoming the first 3-time heavyweight champion in history. It was a testament to longevity and pride. On July 27, 1979, at 37 years old, he announced his retirement. Yet retirement is rarely easy for those who have lived under bright lights. He returned once more to face Larry Holmes in 1980. Holmes had once been his sparring partner. The fight was painful to watch. Ali absorbed punishment without the defensive instincts that once protected him. In the 10th round, his trainer stopped the bout. This was the only fight in his career that he had ever lost by stoppage. And it was mercy. A final fight followed in the Bahamas, ending in a 10-round decision and another loss by the former champ. This time, there was no talk of a comeback. Ali acknowledged what his body had already told him. He was finished fighting. In the years that followed, the symptoms became undeniable. His hands trembled. His movements slowed. His speech softened and sometimes slurred. Doctors eventually diagnosed him with Parkinson's disease, a degenerative neurological condition widely believed to be linked to years of accumulated head trauma. The man who once floated like a butterfly now moved carefully, deliberately. And yet something extraordinary happened. As his physical power declined, his moral presence expanded. In 1996 at the Olympic Games, Ali stood before the world to light the torch. His hands shook visibly as he held the flame. The stadium fell silent. That moment transcended sport. The same man who once proclaimed himself the greatest now embodied humility and perseverance. Strength no longer meant speed or knockout power. It meant standing despite tremor. Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." In his later years, he devoted himself to humanitarian work, peace initiatives, and charitable efforts. He traveled globally despite his condition, advocating for compassion and understanding. His record remained impressive on paper. 56 wins, 5 losses, 37 knockouts, and 3 heavyweight titles. But the numbers tell only part of the story. The true measure of Muhammad Ali cannot be found in statistics. It is found in sacrifice. He sacrificed prime years for conviction. He sacrificed public approval for principle. He sacrificed comfort for identity. He once said, "He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life." Muhammad Ali took risks that extended far beyond the ring. That is why he remains more than a champion. He remains a standard. When the noise fades, when the crowds go home, when the lights dim and the belt is placed back in a case, what remains? With Muhammad Ali, what remains is not just the knockouts, not just the poetry. It's not even just the titles. What remains is conviction. Ali once said, "I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was." Most people hear arrogance in that line. But if you listen carefully, you hear something else. You hear belief. Not belief that the world will hand you greatness, but belief that you must declare it internally before the world ever sees it. Muhammad Ali declared his greatness long before he held the championship. And then he did something far more difficult than winning a belt. He defended his identity when it cost him everything. He lost 3.5 prime years. He lost income. He lost public approval. He lost physical pieces of himself that would never return. But he never lost his voice. Ali understood that courage is not measured only in punches absorbed. It is measured in stands taken. He stood when silence would have been easier. He stood when agreement would have been safer. He stood when the entire system told him to kneel. And then, when his body began to betray him, when his hands trembled and his speech slowed, he stood again. He stood in Atlanta in 1996, holding the Olympic torch with shaking hands, and the world saw something even greater than speed or power. They saw endurance. Muhammad Ali was a 3-time heavyweight champion. He finished with 56 wins and 37 knockouts. But those numbers are not why he echoes through history. He echoes because he chose principle over comfort. He echoes because he chose belief over fear. He echoes because when everything that made him physically great began to fade, his spirit did not. And that is the lesson. Greatness is not built in the moments of applause. It is built in the quiet decisions no one sees. It is built in discipline. It is built in courage. It is built in saying, "This is who I am," and living with the consequences. Muhammad Ali once told us, "Don't count the days. Make the days count." He did. Every one of them. And that is why Muhammad Ali is not just remembered. He is felt. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it reminded you what conviction really looks like, then don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a rating, follow the show, pass the story forward. Because greatness like this isn't meant to sit in silence. It's meant to echo. And if you believe, like Ali believed, that greatness is built in habits, in discipline, and standing firm when it costs you, then you're already part of this community. This is the discipline of greatness. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next Thursday with a new episode of the Discipline of Greatness Sports Podcast.